So it is Tuesday, the 27th of September, 2022. It is 8:30 p.m. and this is a new show that I'm starting. It's called Criztoz in Conversation with, and on this episode, I've got someone I know from my hometown, a guy called Tetris, Ed, to his to his close friend. And I met him in my hometown, but also we bumped into each other and hung out a little bit at Boomtown Festival. So we're going to be talking about lots of cool stuff. And there's a slight difference to my normal shows. Normally, we're talking about 45, 7-inch vinyl, the vinyl culture, but there's so much other cool music and stuff happening out there that I thought it'd be good to talk to some other people as well. So, we're going to be talking about his musical influences, DJing, producing, building a sound system, Boomtown, lots of really cool stuff like that. So, without further ado, here he is. How you doing, Ed?
Hello. Yes, mate. Very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's it's been an all right Tuesday. It's gradually getting a bit
Yeah,
chillier here in the UK.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I
But
keep
other
looking at
than
that
that,
thermostat and thinking,
I
"Oh,
know
do it?" But nah, not yet.
we're in a strange world, aren't we, at the moment, where you're
Mm,
like, don't want to switch it on just yet because
yeah,
things are going crazy at
yeah,
the moment.
yeah,
But thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for being my guest on this brand new show. So
yeah.
my
It's my
first
pleasure.
guest. So that's cool.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very
Um,
much.
with all my guests, I'm always intrigued and interested to find out how music, because all my guests have got music as a passion.
Mm,
Apart from you, who's not in the 45s, most of the others are 45s DJs. We've had a comedian as well, and a couple of other people. But I'm always intrigued as to how people first got into music. So was it family? Was it friends? Was it brothers, sisters? What was it for you that sort of got you into music when you were young?
yeah, I mean, as I guess a lot of people did, starts with sort of parents. My dad was a big music fan. Or, I mean, both my parents were, to be fair, but my dad would always have to have music on. Always have to have music playing in the house. So if he did pick us up, brought us home from school or whatever, first thing he would do would turn the radio on or put on an album, an LP, and so that it kind of started with that. Really, he was always playing all sorts of stuff like Eurythmics, Dire Straits, Blur, the Cardiacs, like a real kind of mixture of stuff and of sounds. And like I said, it often had the radio on too. So there was just always music was just kind of always there. And yeah, I'm one of four. I've got a younger brother, an older sister, and a younger sister, and we're all very passionate about music in all sorts of different ways. But the real thing that kind of really got under my skin and really started to steer me towards like who I am and what got me into DJing and what really kind of got my attention was my older cousin. Got an
All
older
right.
cousin, he's
Okay.
about 8 years my senior, and as a kid I used to go around my auntie's house and he used to have these like tape packs and
Right.
CDs and all that kind of thing. And I remember so it sounds so cliche now. He took me out in the back in his Nova SR,
Right.
1.4
Yeah.
Nova SR. He had all
Yeah.
tuned
Yeah.
up, sound system in the back. And this is like, I don't know, 94, 95. So I would have been about 10.
Right.
And
Okay.
he was playing these like rave hardcore tapes. And it
Nice.
just, 10-year-old me, it just blew my mind. Like this wasn't music I heard anywhere else. This was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
this was something else. And yeah, that just I just became fascinated by this kind of this other music that was there. It wasn't what my dad was playing. It wasn't on the radio. It was something else. And yeah, it was that really. He lent me about maybe about a year later. It must have been yeah, probably maybe 96. He lent me a tape pack, which I just studied. It was actually from a rave in Brighton,
I
which
was, I was,
is yeah,
yeah, I was going to say, because obviously if he was, so you were 10, he was 18, so that was 94. I was 18 as well, and we
yeah.
used to go raving in Brighton to some of these
Okay,
illegal raves like Ovingdean and Shore and stuff like that. So it's
yeah,
possible it could be sort of linked to one of
yeah,
those
quite
raves.
possibly. I mean, did you ever hear of there was the particular rave pack was Origin?
Yeah,
was an
I've heard of
Origin
Origin.
rave
Yeah,
pack.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was it was. Funnily enough, I found it on eBay about 6 months ago, and
Nice.
I bought it I bought the cassette pack on eBay,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I remembered almost word for word every MC lyric on every one of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
tapes.
yeah. Yeah.
And I mean that really was like the real start of my kind of, yeah, you know, that's where I learned about DJs, MCs, nightclubs, like you know, all this stuff. It just completely fascinated me, and yeah, that
It's
kind of
just
started everything, really.
energy, wasn't it? I mean, I remember when at that sort of time at school, we'd get the odd cassette thing, and
Mm,
there'd be like some guy a couple of years older who'd been to a rave and he'd been emceeing and he'd play it. And again, you just listen to it over and over and over again because
yeah,
this was pre-internet, pre-streaming,
yeah, a
download,
wonderful
pre
time.
anything. So basically, well, yeah, very different, wasn't it? So you either had your
Very
cassette
different time. Yeah,
that you'd sort of recorded off whatever or been passed down, or you
yeah,
had records or CDs. You know, it's a very, very different time,
yeah,
but an exciting time. It was it definitely set me on a path to, you know, sort of where I've sort of gone and ended up, you
yeah,
know, over the years. And
yeah.
we'll get to Boomtown because it's almost like, you know, going back
Yes,
to going back to
yeah.
sort of that sort of time.
We will. Yeah, we'll. Yeah,
Boomtown. Cool. Okay, so that's the sort of, you know, sort of your influences and what's happened. So where did it
yeah.
go from there in terms of sort of getting to the stage where you're DJing?
Well, so he, my same cousin actually, he got some turntables. There were SoundLab belt drives, DLP 1600s,
Mm.
with a DSM-5 mixer, a 3 or 4 channel mixer, like no EQs on it, but it had a crossfader. And these SoundLab turntables, they had like 2 separate pitch adjusts, one for 33 speed and one for 45, and you
Oh,
had
that's
like,
interesting.
you had like this much movement on each one. And I remember, you know, I knew through my dad, I knew how to put a needle on a record and, you know, to be careful with
Yeah.
it and all that kind of stuff. And he left these turntables at my auntie's. I think he must have moved out, I guess, but he left these turntables at my auntie's house. And me and my younger brother used to go over and stay in the summer holidays and stuff. And they were there, and I basically like hooked them up. He might have shown me like roughly how they went together, but he never really got into DJing. He was just like, you know, I'll get some of these because it's cool kind of thing. And
Right. Okay.
and his mates used to buy some records and bring them over and stuff. So his record collection was mostly dance stuff.
Yeah.
But there was, you know,
Oh, you
I
can't.
had a K-Doc, The Night Train on Positiva Records, and
Yeah.
Sash Ecuador on Multiply. And I just had these 2 records on, and I'd kind of learned through talking to people and stuff that, you know, a DJ's job is to beat match. Because originally I just didn't know what a DJ did. I knew they were on the stage and they played
Yeah.
tunes, but I didn't actually know what they were doing. And then, yeah, I was, you know, someone told me that, you know, you get them in tempo, you sort of lock the tempos together. And I just got these 2 records, and I was just messing around with the speed. And I remember getting them like locked, and I just went from one to the other, then back to the other one, and back to the other, and back to the other for about half an hour. And like, that was it. I mean, I remember it so clearly. And I must have been, like I said, it would have been probably like maybe 98, maybe 98,
Yeah.
99, something like that.
I think
And yeah,
I think a lot of DJs do that. I think I had Naughty NMX on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about basically exactly the same thing. He got it locked. He said, and then he sort of went to bed, and then came back the next morning, and it was still locked, and still, you know, did
yeah,
that. But I was saying to you before we started the show that I went to Beat Geek on Sunday, and I took Zia, my daughter, and they had loads of setups like. And again, she was just there having a go with Serato. And again, I think because she plays 45s, but she's not yet at the stage of sort of beat matching or anything like that. But again, she was working out what she was trying to do and trying to get them sort of in tune by moving the crossfader and that. So it's again, hopefully that will stick in her head and hopefully that will carry on. But it's amazing these little, you know, these points in our lives that we remember that have sort of, you know, grown into what we do further down the line.
They're so pivotal, aren't they? They're just they're those moments where your life suddenly just goes,
yeah,
just
exactly,
totally 100% takes a turn in this sort of certain direction.
It's like, you know, if your cousin hadn't had those decks, you know, you may You
Yeah.
might have done, but you might not have done it at that point, and it may not have gone in that sort of direction. You know,
Well,
it's sometimes
I
it's
mean,
meant to be.
absolutely, because that's the thing. I didn't know anyone else that did it, and I don't think that was an influence on why I did it. I just I did it. You know, I guess I was you know, looking up to my cousin and this kind of, you know, his mates and this kind of DJ culture. But, you know, none of my mates were into hardcore. None of them were into raves or DJing or anything like that. No one knew what it was. And yeah, the fact that I mean, it's always, and it still is like quite a kind of a personal sort of thing for me. So it's nice to be able to talk about it actually, because there's not many times that I've had the opportunity. So yeah,
well,
you know,
exactly.
thank you
And
for that.
it's interesting what you're saying, because when I was at school, most of my friends were into sort of grunge, because it was like Nirvana and grunge and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't really into that, but because of somehow I had like a hi-fi set that had a really long aerial, and I sort of stuck it around my room, and I was able to get Kiss FM in London. So I was able to get Colin Dale, Colin Favor, listen to like Prodigy stuff, listen to maybe stuff, you know, way before it was coming out officially. And I would make these tapes and take them to school, and people like sort of got it but didn't. You know, they were like, oh, this isn't grunge, this isn't that. So I was sort of on the sidelines listening to my sort of crazy music. But yeah, but that's still what I'm doing in one sense.
I know.
Still
That's
listening
it, isn't it? It's like
niche music, different to everyone else. Cool. Okay. So that's sort of the start of DJing. I assume that progresses at some point to some gigs. What about sort of first gigs and things like that?
Yeah. So it I mean, so what was this? So well, so I ended up getting my cousin's turntables. So I mean, to say he's been
they got
like
handed down,
a fairly major influence on everything, like in many ways. So yeah, I ended up getting these turntables, and you know, once I got them, like that's it. I used to do this was 99. I was I was 14, Christmas 99, I got them. And I did my first. I kind of don't really even know how it happened. I got them. Yes, I got them early. That was it. I got the turntables like a few months before Christmas, but they were my 99 Christmas present. And I had a friend who was doing a house party on New Year's Eve 99, and they just said, "Oh, look, you know, will you bring your decks?" And I was just like, "Yeah, cool, awesome." And I think I had about 20 records. And I remember, cassette tapes at the time, you used to get the little sticky labels in there with like the numbers and the letters and stuff on. I remember going, like, setting up my getting all my records, putting them in order, getting my set list together and sticking the numbers. So I numbered all the records on the tops of the sleeve, so I knew which order to kind of play them in. And that was a friend of mine brought a hi-fi round that I plugged everything into, and we blew his speakers probably within the first like hour of the night. And it was just, it was New Year's Eve 99. Like, we all thought planes were going to fall from the sky and microwaves were going to explode.
That was a weird New Year's Eve, wasn't it? Millennium
was so
bug,
weird.
it's all going to collapse, everything. And then it sort of just happened, and nothing happened.
Yeah, you know, just went, oh, okay, we'll just carry on.
All right, 2000 now. Yeah. That was a strange one.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fun way to sort of start. And I assume more gigs after that, or
so because I had the stuff, I ended up getting some kind of floor standing like speakers as well. I think probably for my birthday, so probably my 16th birthday, I got some floor standing speakers. And at that point I kind of had everything that you could do a house party with. And I did a few things with mates. I did a couple of parties for friends at their houses. Did like my sister's party, her 18th, I think it was, later on that year. And I did one of her friends' parties. There was an old bar in town in the Eastbourne train station, Tracks, I think it was called.
That was my local. I used to go there a lot.
Okay. I remember, and I played there. I did one of her friend's birthday parties, and then she asked me to do her dad's birthday party. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like, I got like 40 quid for it or something. But I remember I used to take my dad's CD hi-fi separate with me. I'd take a personal CD player and then my turntables. And so I could kind of play my records, but I could also play like other stuff. And
so early CDJ Effectively, yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
cool.
And I remember just thinking like, I don't really want to just do this like mobile DJing thing. This isn't what this doesn't do
Yeah,
it for me. I want to be playing, self-centered as it is, I want to be playing the music I want to play. I don't
yeah,
want to just sort of play stuff to please other people. Like that was the point. I kind of knew I was actually more interested in playing something that's a bit different and not just kind of crowd pleasing, I suppose. And that was kind of the last gig I actually did for quite a long time, really. But I got really into DJing at home. So, I remember like cutting up a plastic bag to put underneath the slip mat so that you could like
yeah,
scratch on belt drive turntables.
yeah,
And then I got my Vestax. We were just talking about Vestax.
yeah.
It was just when Vestax came out, so it must have been sort of 2001, I think. And they were about 350 quid, and you could basically either spend your 350 quid on a 1210, or you could spend 350 quid on this brand new Technics killing Vestax, like this spaceship looking thing. Like I was just like, and I was like, yeah, I'm having one of them.
Which one was
And
it? What model was that?
the PDX 2000.
2000. Okay, yeah, we were
But
talking about I think it was Mark II, wasn't it? And then these are 3000s.
Yes.
And then there's all sorts of other
Yeah,
crazy.
they're like these crazy ones with little joysticks on and stuff like that. I think for like pitch nudging and stuff.
They're so innovative, the thing. They just kept coming out stuff. And there's the there's the controller one which Woody sort of designed, and well, it's not, you can't quite see, but it's almost a bit like this sort of thing I've got on here, which is buttons, and a bit like I was talking to you about the reloops, where you can change the pitch platter, the speed of the pitch, and that's sort of what he was doing and being able to play tunes. But yeah, no, Vestax, I love them.
Yeah,
I love
yeah. I mean, I still to this day would say it was arguably a better turntable than a 1210, but it's different things, isn't it? And I ended up selling those turntables a few years later to go snowboarding, which I do and don't regret. But then like a few years later again, I bought some more because I got into cars and all that sort of stuff as well. So I kind of took a bit of a hiatus, I suppose, from DJing for a while. But I always kept my records. So like I could never get rid of the records that I've got. That's a passion that we have, I suppose, amongst vinyl lovers.
It's an addiction, and a little bit of the hoarding nature of you don't want to get rid of
it's a collecting.
It's definitely collecting and keeping.
And they're your things, aren't they? They're your records. Like you can't have the same record. You can't sell a record and then buy it back again because it's not the same as that one that you had, that one that you used to play.
And also we talk a lot about this on this show. It's especially if you buy it from a record shop. Obviously a bit different now with vinyl, buying online and Discogs and Juno and all the rest of it. But even now, if I go to a record shop and I buy a few records, I will always remember when I play that's that record shop I bought it from. And that's again, firing off the neurons in the head, which is a really important thing. Or some of the gigs I go to, people will give me a record, and then you're like, okay, I remember that person gave me. So there's that connection as well with records that you don't have with MP3s or
CDs
or anything like that. You just don't have it.
It's just not the same, is it? It's not the same. I mean, I've got like hard drives full of like thousands and thousands of tunes, but it's just not the same. Like I couldn't tell you I almost couldn't tell you any songs that are on there because they're just not visual. Like it's it's definitely a personality trait. I think you either go for this kind of stuff and vinyl just works for you, and having that hands-on feel, and like you said, the color of the sleeves, I remember there's so much more to it than just the sound of the record. It's the visual, it's the smell in some cases. It's just there's so much more. I mean, jumping forwards a bit, ironically it was digital that kind of got me back into DJing again. This would have been about 2008, 2009. I'd got really into, before I kind of got rid of my turntables and stuff, I started getting into drum and bass, and I'd been into went through hip hop and drum and bass and dance, hard house, like techno, trance, like all that, kind of a bit of everything. I just found it all had its time and its place. But around 2008, 2009, I found this website called Beatport, through a mate of mine, Adam, who had a release out on it, and I was just like, wow, there's this kind of website and you can just scroll through loads of music, like a bit like being in a record shop, but like it from the comfort of your own home. And that's what that, and I also started to get quite heavily into dubstep around that time as well, around sort of 2008. And that really got my attention. I was drum and bass was cool. And I still love a bit of jungle and stuff, but the drum and bass scene was, I don't know, it was just getting a bit, I just lost interest in it. And where I lost interest in the drum and bass side of things, the dubstep, that was really interesting. It had a similar kind of structure in it. Had the bass, that had the drums, it had the percussion, it had the groove and stuff like that, but it was just at this kind of weird tempo that didn't really make much sense. But
yeah, it's slowed down, isn't it? It's almost like slowed down drum and bass, because it's about 140, isn't it? Most dubstep, and obviously drum and bass at 165, 175, that sort of thing. It's definitely
it was a weird time. But I always had big sound systems in my car. Like that was one of the so my music, it was always there, but it kind of shifted where it was kind of focused on, I suppose. So I think I had a sound system before I even had my driving license for my first car. Had these massive big JBL 12-inch subs in the back of it. I took all the back seats out. I made all these fiberglass things up for the front. Like I've just always been a geek, and I've always wanted to, I guess, try and have more than is immediately available to me. So like the only way you do that is by doing it yourself, right? So
definitely it's a DIY thing, isn't it? And I think especially playing out, one of the things as the DJs is you always want to play on a decent system, don't you?
Absolutely.
And it's really disappointing sometimes when you turn up and like the system's it's just like,
massively so.
Or there's no sub or something like that, and you're just like, it's missing
exactly
half
that.
It's missing half the music,
it's missing all the point.
So it's then sort of leads you to sort of building your own stuff. So exactly that quite nicely leads on to sort of that. Well, let's pause that actually. So did the building sound system come, because you did some production as well, don't you? You do some production.
I do. The production side of things is purely really for my kind of just own self. I've had a couple of bits released, but nothing of any sort of nothing really of any importance.
But did that come before or after the sort of starting to build your own sort of systems and stuff like that?
It's kind of hard to say, really. Because it's probably only really been around sort of 2010 that I kind of really got into producing. But at the same time, I had Music 2000 on the PlayStation, on the PlayStation 1 when I was back at school. I remember playing around with that. I had Dance EJ on the PC when we first got our PCs, and I remember making loops and riffs and putting stuff together on there. And I've got a CD somewhere where I got Fruity Loops as well. I worked at college as a music technician at Sussex Downs College. I was a music tech there for a little while, and I got some music software when I was working there. And Fruity Loops 3. I remember I made a drum and bass tune on there, sampling a Blur riff and then like a breakbeat and a Madonna vocal, I think. Just Busta Rhymes, sorry, Woo-Ha. I made a drum and bass version of Woo-Ha. And just so, and that was all back in like mid 2000s, so when I wasn't DJing. But the sound system thing came about more in about 2012. So skipping through a bit, 2010 started to get more back into DJing again. I did a first couple of gigs locally around Eastbourne and stuff, and I started to get involved with some of the local guys, some of the local DJs and that. And then 2012 I went to a dubstep night called System, which was in Tufnell Park in London, and it was two DJs that I kind of really looked up to, a producer called Vivek and a producer called Mala. yeah, Maller's sort of pretty well known
Yeah.
across the board. And they basically just did a night, and it just the flyer was just system, this venue, Maller and Vivek. That was it. Didn't say anything else. And you turned up, like, having bought a ticket, no one knew what to expect. And basically Vivek had this big system, like two systems, like 8 scoops and all the rest that goes with it. And he had two, like, it split into two on both sort of sides of the room, and then just some turntables in the middle, and they turned all the lights off, and they just played dub plates and records, like, just back to back all night long. And it just blew my mind. Like, anyone that went to that night remembers that night. It was a real like special moment. And what I loved about it was the fact it was so simple. It was just like, we've got a big room, we've chucked some big speakers in it, we're playing some records, and the vibe was like better than any other vibe that I had experienced before in a club or anything like that. It was just so special and so intimate.
It's definitely. I used to go to quite a lot of dub stuff with a friend called Dan Bowes. I don't know if you know Dan, but we went to, like, University of Dub, and separately I went up with my wife to Irish and Steppers and West Indies Club, and it's only when you go into those like a big leisure centre or just a big room, like you say, and all it is just speakers and some decks and people enjoying the sound, and it's people getting right up to the speakers and feeling the sub. And you really feel the music, and there's something to be said. And certainly up at West Indies Club, you walked in and the bass was so heavy that you just couldn't breathe. Just completely took your breath away. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. And he's going, oh, we're only on number 7. We're going to turn it up. And you're just like, what? How can you turn it up? But it's that power of the sound. And like you say, it's just a room, music, amazing speakers, amazing sound system, and that is just just really hits you, doesn't it?
It's really, really special. And I mean, basically, literally, I got home that evening, the next day, and I was just like, I want to try and do that. I want to try and replicate that somehow.
Yeah. But that's the thing about music, is it's inspiring, and every little step and every little thing you do is like, okay, well, I like that, and I like this, and I like that, and then obviously, right, let's try and do something, and it's really important, and it's really good. So how does that lead on to you sort of starting to build your own systems? I mean, did someone teach you how to do it? Was it all DIY again?
No, it was I just so this is where the wonders of the internet come in, right? I'd going back a few years, when I said I got into cars, I basically just used to sit there reading car forums all night long, all night to like the early hours, like reading how people did certain jobs, how how do you change an oil filter, how do you do this, how do you all this kind of stuff. And I ended up learning quite a lot about cars and doing a lot to my own car. Changed the engine over, changed all the suspension, like just did everything. So again, it was that, like, I wanted to have something good. I couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it, so I just had to figure out how to do it for myself. And the joy of the internet is that you can really learn about absolutely anything if you want to. The information's there, right? And I just started just reading up, just looking up about sound systems. And initially, so this was February 2012. I put on my first kind of event. So I told you I'd previously already had these 2 like floor standing speakers. Which I'd had many years. They ended up spending a long time in my mate's skate shop in town, and I got them back, and I was like, they're not enough. So I just started stealing and borrowing anything I could to get some speakers, and I bought like a Behringer 18-inch sub, and I bought some just secondhand amps. I was just kind of scrounging around to see what I could get, and I kind of built. So April 2012. So what's that? Like 3 months later, thereabouts. I've managed to cobble together enough stuff, and I hired out a room at the top of the Crown and Anchor in Eastbourne. Crown and Anchor in Eastbourne, and I just turned up with this just pile of just random speakers, and I just piled them kind of all up in a corner of the room, and invited a load of mates down to play, and it was sick, actually. It was really good fun, and bless them, some of the guys that came down to play, like, you know, are still like doing some quite decent events and stuff now. Like, yeah, I was kind of honored that they kind of came along at that time. But yeah, and that was it. And it was just like, this is loads of fun. Like, just got some speakers, we've got a room, we've got some mates, everyone's having a cool time. Like, you know, people were kind of widely accepting dubstep at that time. What's that like? Yeah, like 2012. But there was so much more to it as well. Like, you know, you're having like Chase and Status and Nero and that kind of stuff in the charts. But I was like, yeah, but there's so much more to that sound than just kind of that. And I did another. The first one went quite well at the Crown and Anchor, and I did another one, I think, a few months later that wasn't quite so good. And yeah, they were just like, yeah, we don't want you to come back here again with that. And I was like, all right, fine, fair enough.
We were talking a little bit about this. I mean, obviously, you know, Eastbourne is a little bit of an apathetic town in terms of, you know, yes, you'll do something and people will come to the first one, but as with anything, you need that momentum. You know, you need people to come to the second and third and fourth event before you start sort of building up, and you've got to be able to keep going. And unfortunately, there's not many venues who will give you, you know, 3 or 4 chances. You know, they'll say, right, okay, well, if it's not a success immediately, or, you know, we don't take whatever on the bar, then we're going to try something else. But at the end of the day, you know, they let you do it. You did it. It worked. And it obviously set you off down a path, you know, so it's, you know, all credit to them, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely not knocking them for it. It was, yeah, you know, at the end of the day, we were just a bunch of kids turning up, and like, we weren't buying any drinks. We were just hanging out upstairs playing really loud music that no one downstairs liked, probably
wanted to hear.
So yeah, you know, it's cool. But like you said, absolutely, yeah, you know, that started the journey. And I think it was about, so at that time I just bought speakers that I could find, and I quite quickly, as I was doing more reading and more learning and more research and stuff, I was like, you can't just put a load of speakers in a pile and expect it to sound good. And the big thing with dubstep is that you do, like you said, you have to hear it properly. Like, if you don't hear the sub bass, if you don't hear the bass much, you're missing like half of the music effectively. Like, there's parts of it that it's fueled by the bass, by the bass line, and then the percussion is just the sort of the sprinkling on the top effectively. It's you really need to hear it properly. And you know, where sort of like privately hired venues weren't kind of stepping in, we found you know, Bar Blue. God bless Bar Blue, seriously. Like, they, you know, they let us kind of do a lot of what we wanted to do. I think anyone that's DJed in Eastbourne for any period of time has probably played in there, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I did. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my sort of first nights, you know, I did Funky Junk and Varilek for, you know, a good couple of years in there. You know, every other week. You know, and it's great. You know, it's brilliant. You know, it's you can just play what you want. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could just do what you wanted. And I remember when we first played in there, the sound system they had was pretty awful, to be fair. You know, no disrespect to them, but it was pretty poor. And that's when I started to realize, okay, well, I need to start working on the bass. If I can get some good subs, some good bass speakers, then, you know, I can kind of get by here. So I kind of looked around the line, and at the time I had quite an important factor in the sound system I ended up building was the fact I had a very small lockup underneath the flat I was living in with my now wife. It was basically like a quarter of a garage size. And so anything I made would have to fit in this little kind of lockup. It would have to fit in through the doors. It would have to fit in this little space. And so I found like some plans online, some you know, just downloadable plans for making what they call a Cubo bass cabinet. And, you know, loads of people have tried and tested them, and loads of people are like, you know, these are really good. Like, yeah, they're not scoops or whatever. They're not going to, like, you know, melt your face off or whatever, but they're good for what they are. And I was just like, okay, they're pretty simple build as well. There's like not too many angled cuts and stuff. And I basically just downloaded these plans, bought some sheets of MDF, and just sat on the communal driveway outside our flats we were living in, just cutting up bits of wood and sticking them together. And I made 2 of these subs to start with, and that was where it all started.
That's the thing that always I can't make the link with that, because obviously I see these subs and I see these scoops, and it looks like they're obviously just bits of wood sort of put together. So from a technical side, obviously it is just MDF or wood or whatever it is. But how do you then get the sound in there? Do you have to put a obviously, well, you're creating a speaker, so I don't know what the right word is. What do you put in there to get that sort of bass
Well,
sound?
if you go, there are various websites. One of the main one so you can buy everything. So you can buy everything in bits and pieces. And there's loads of speaker manufacturers. There's loads of speaker designers and stuff, loads of companies. Like Void, for example, are quite a popular, well-known brand. They're the driver that they use in most of their cabinets, the V18. You can just buy those. You can buy that, just the speaker on its own, and you can put it in whatever kind of cabinet you like. You can make whatever you want for it. People have designed, and there's people out there far geekier than I am, and they kind of sit there, and you can, there's software that's designed so you can say, I want 30 hertz frequency, and it will, you can assemble and design a box. It is really fascinating. It's not something I've delved too into, but the kind of the basic kind of concept, I suppose, is if you give the larger the speaker and the longer the kind of the horn path, and the way the horn path expands and things like that will emphasize kind of certain frequencies. If you put a speaker in a sealed box, the speaker will be able to respond a certain way, but it'll be fighting against itself because it can't push any air out. But if you can make it push the air out in a way that emphasizes a certain frequency, then you can get louder, more specific frequencies.
And is that where scoops come in? Because obviously it's pushing the air through
exactly
like a slide effectively and out, isn't it?
That's exactly it. So if you kind of cut a scoop in half and look at the horn path, you've got the speaker at the front, and then the horn path actually kind of goes up and down, and then I think up again, and then round, and then out the bottom, and it's getting bigger and it's expanding the whole time. And that's kind of what allows the speaker to breathe, I suppose, for want of a better term. But if you can, it's a fascinating subject. It really is.
We are getting proper geeky, but then that's the whole point of shows like this, because and unless people talk about it, they don't know. And I'm sure someone at some point might watch this back and think, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to get into that.
It's a lot of fun.
So you managed to create stuff that would fit in your lockup, so that wasn't like massive, but that was big enough and powerful enough and bassy enough to make it worth doing.
Exactly that. It was the whole system that I built at the time, or that I have, was built that would fit into my cabinet. Was not. It was all designed around certain speakers that weren't particularly expensive. I mean, I don't think any kind of one part of my sound system cost more than a couple of £100. Each of the subwoofers, I've got 3 18-inch subwoofers. They at the time I think were about £170 each or something. The MDF sheets of MDF were a tenner or something. If you get them through kind of wholesale and stuff, it's like super cheap. And nothing was particularly, even the amplifiers and stuff were no more than about 220 quid each. So I managed to kind of, over the months, sort of just chip away, back in the days of pre-children and having a disposable managed to kind of managed to kind of build up a pretty decent, solid sound system. And again, like, it was all done through research. Like, I have individual amplifiers for each. It's a 4-way system, so I've got sub, kick, mids, and high frequencies, and each section has its own amplifier. So nothing, even when I push it hard, nothing is actually being really pushed too hard in terms of, like, I'm not putting any real strain on anything. And it's, I'm really pleased with it. I've had the whole system set up as it is now for maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years possibly. I've had the whole assembled thing. It's still, I don't use it quite as much now as I did, for the reasons of children, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But
it's again, it's interesting. So I was going to ask you about, obviously, you know, when you go to sound systems and you know, things that obviously they've always got like racks and racks of amps, and obviously that explains what it is, because each one of those amps is powering a different part of the sound, effectively, in a different part of the system. And then I guess on top of that, I think you did show me. I was a little bit worse for wear when you showed me, but you did sort of show me roughly how it sort of worked. But then you've got like a sort of like almost like a mixing desk, haven't you? I think.
Yeah.
I think you showed
I
me
did for Boomtown.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, I did for Boomtown because I just needed. There were supposed to be like multiple MCs and things like that, so we just wanted to have a slightly more flexible system. So I mean, I just ran through it very briefly. I have kind of a master limiter, which is just a stereo limiter, so it takes, you know, out of your DJ mixer, you've got your stereo pair left and right, it goes into the limiter, and that's what they call like a brick wall limiter. You know, past a certain setting, it won't let anything else through.
Okay.
And it'll just start to compress stuff. So it then comes out of that. You've then got a nice safe signal, no matter how red the DJ's playing it, or no matter how loud the pops or the crackles or the MC. You've then got a nice stable level going into the speaker management, and that basically takes the stereo in and can split it between 4, 8, you know, depending on what setup you've got, different outputs. And so that's where you then divide the frequency. So you sum the stereo pair together. So you've just then got a mono signal, which is an interesting topic when it comes to making music and stuff, because actually a lot of sound systems and nightclubs and stuff sum everything to mono anyway. And then it then gets broken down into whichever frequencies you want. So you have your sub frequencies, which is up to about 100 hertz or so, and then you have like 100 to 400 perhaps would be like your kick frequencies, which is that kind of thumping bass that you get, the one that really hits you in your chest. And then you've got your mids and your highs that kind of go up from there. And it's you know, it, as you've kind of said earlier, like it's important for everything to be present when you're playing a record. Like you want to hear it all. You don't want to just, you know, if the mids are too harsh or the highs are too, you know, are too present, then it's just harsh and it's uncomfortable to listen to. And that's something I learned from doing bad gigs in bad venues. Well, not bad venues, but poorly equipped venues. If the music doesn't sound good, it's regardless of how good the music is. If it sounds terrible, you're not going to enjoy it. So
no, exactly. And especially with this sort of with electronic music, dubstep, drum and bass, and all of that, a lot of the producers, and I know this from talking to Dub One, you know, they spend so much time on frequencies, and so like, you know, each, you know, kick drum or whatever, you know, it's sort of EQ'd, so it's just a specific frequency, and the same for bass and all the rest of it. And again, you know, if you're playing on just a system that doesn't take that into account, it's not going to sound great, which is why I really enjoyed going to Boomtown, because it was pretty much all sound systems that were sort of set up for that. Now yours is called 30 hertz, so obviously you've mentioned 30 hertz. Is it to do with the frequency? Is that specifically that, or is there another reason for it?
It is. So it's I'll have to kind of come clean on things. The subwoofers that I built don't really cater for a frequency that low. 30, you know, the human hearing frequency range is classified as being 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Realistically, you'd struggle really to hear much below 30 hertz. So 30 hertz is kind of like, you know, that's the kind of the bad boy frequency that you want to kind of try and focus on. Also, if you've got a subwoofer that is handling 20 hertz, it's probably not going to handle much else, because it's such a difficult frequency for a speaker to do well and to do loud, for various physics, you know, reasons of physics that are way beyond my knowledge. So 30 hertz is kind of the golden frequency really to aim for with a sound system. The speakers that I've got don't really cater for that. The 30 hertz name was actually originally like a collective of me and two good mates of mine, Ben and Chris. And we were like the 30 hertz collective, and I then started to build the sound system, so it was like the 30 hertz sound system. But yeah, since then I've been called out on it a couple of times. So which is why I was saying earlier about wanting to try and build some new subwoofers, something that can do. I mean, they do pretty well. I mean, they'll go down to about 35 hertz. And you know, they sound really nice, and they're nice and loud and stuff, but they're there's that, especially with dubstep, you do notice there's that little bit of extra low end that they just don't quite cater for. So yeah, I need to work on that. That's that's the second goal.
I've got a one pick here, I think. So
yeah.
That's it, Boomtown. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Boomtown. So you guys were in Botanica Zoo.
That's right. Yes.
And I think from memory, you there were so many stages, but I think this is how it was on that one. Yours was in sort of that corner, and then I think there was another system the other side. Is that right?
Yeah, there was so yes, that's right. So when Nick, friend of mine, came to me with this kind of suggestion, or you know, he was just asking about whether my sound system would be available or not, and he didn't tell me at the time what it was going to be for, but he just said, you know, there's a festival, like quite a big festival, you know, we're in talks with, you know, would you be up for doing it? And I said yes. And I tend to sort of downplay things a little bit. I don't like to big myself up. I don't like to big up what my system's kind of capable of doing. You know, the last thing I want to do is have you know, put on an event and people be disappointed.
Yeah, sure.
That's a whole other subject I might touch on a bit later on perhaps, but you know, disappointing people is not something that I like doing. No. Where I can avoid it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it was specifically because I was like, oh yeah, you know, it should be okay, and I think they might have been able to tell my sort of slight apprehension as to why they got another sound system involved, or they already knew of the other sound system. But the kind of the general rule with speakers is it's as I say a lot of the time, it's much easier to turn down loudspeakers than it is to try and turn up quiet ones. You know, it's better to have more than you need and not push it too hard than it is to be like wringing the neck off or something like in the corner of the room. So and I think they knew these guys as well. They might have spoken to us both simultaneously. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, so I did a link up with the Critical Youth Sound System, who were from Newcastle, I think, or they were certainly, that's where the kind of the friendship and the link with the guys running or organizing the stage came from up in Newcastle.
And it's, I mean, I think one of the other things I noticed is it was great to see that going on, because again, it's collaboration. You know, it's like a collective. It's like, right, we're coming together to put together a really good system, a really good sound for this particular venue. And it was the same at, you know, loads of the other, you know, the Tangled Roots, for example, had Sinai Sounds and another, I can't remember the name of the other system.
Lion Pulse.
Lion, that's it. Yeah, Lion Pulse. And it's just amazing, and just to see this collaboration and people working together for the greater good and the greater sound and the greater, you know, entertainment is I love it, because obviously a lot of what I do is collaboration with lots of other DJs and stuff around the world. So it's great to sort of see that in effect.
Absolutely.
Right, and obviously we'll talk specifically about Boomtown in a minute, but you obviously got to DJ as part of that. I know you weren't particularly well, so you were only there briefly at Boomtown, a day and a bit, and you know, this, that, and the other. But so tell us about that then. So, you know, how did you feel, you know, DJing? You've not been to Boomtown like me. You haven't been to Boomtown before.
No, so that was my first. Like, I mean, I knew of Boomtown. You know, I've got a lot of friends who are into drum and bass and stuff, and you know, I knew of Boomtown, and it you know, these days there's loads of festivals going on. You know, there's hundreds, thousands probably happen all over the country, like every year, every summer. But Boomtown was one that I knew was a little bit different. From sort of pictures and from speaking to people that had been to it and stuff. But you know, I'd only ever really heard good things. It seemed a bit out there. You know, as a 37-year-old married father. It like
Yeah, add a
probably
few more
wouldn't
years
have.
onto that for me as well, but
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I wouldn't have necessarily put it on like top of my list of festivals I
yeah,
must
yeah,
go
yeah,
and visit, but it was definitely one I was, interested in if the opportunity came up, which I'm very, very grateful
yeah,
um,
exactly.
that it did. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was I as I kind of spoke to more and more people about it, I got the vibe that it was like I don't want to say like a dance music version of Glastonbury, but it was less. I don't know.
It's
It's just a bit more open minded, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I did Glastonbury this year and did Boomtown, and I was reading an article, and I think someone described it as like a warehouse party in the
yeah,
fields.
yeah,
And I think for me, obviously, Glastonbury's got the southeast corner where we were sort of DJing and stuff in the unfairground, and you've got Block 9 and all the big sort of stuff. But it's like and Shangri-La, but it's like that sort of times 10.
mm,
It's sort of Glastonbury's like a sort of really condensed bit of Boomtown, but then like you say, Boomtown's just a bit more open, it seems.
yeah,
And I think that's also the music. I think Glastonbury's still primarily bands and rock and
yeah,
indie and
absolutely.
or headliners and all that stuff. And they got a little bit of criticism, Boomtown, didn't they, because of supposedly they didn't have headliners. But
Yeah,
it's not about that. It's about the
no,
vibe,
that's it.
wandering around, turning a corner and walking into, say, Botanica Zoo, or walking into a different stage and hearing music you've never heard before or a style you've never seen. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was amazing. I had a great time. You
yeah,
know,
it was great. I mean, it
brilliant.
was a bit like being like a wild western, like a
Yeah,
futuristic kind of wild western. It was just bonkers, wasn't it? Like
yeah,
and I mean, the effort that those people put into
exactly.
building the structures and those stages and the whole kind of city that was there. It was like a city center, but just
Yeah,
built in the bottom of a field and music orientated and just wild. It
and
was
massive stages, and also like the actors, the people sort of at the top, and
yeah,
the sort of there's the whole sort of. I didn't obviously get into any of it, but there's whole things like there's tasks to do or little adventure things, or you've got to go and
yeah,
find this person in that particular
yeah,
venue, and then you've got to go to there's all this extra stuff that doesn't
yeah,
happen at
yeah,
other festivals that I've been to anyway.
yeah,
I'm sure it does somewhere, but yeah, it was just amazing. But so tell us, so Botanica Zoo's the venue that you were sort of in. So tell us about
yes.
that. Who was behind that, and what was that sort of promoting?
So there was, so I got basically invited along by a friend of mine, Nick, who DJs under the name Manifesto, and another friend of mine, Luke Ekula, who I hope I've said that right. I've known Luke for a long time. I did some regular events in London, in Dalston, with my sound system for Luke. And so he knew my sound system quite well. And Luke also knew the Critical Youth, the other sound system guys, from when he was at university up in Newcastle and stuff. But Nick, he does a lot of kind of this new era rave kind of breaky techno. I mean, Luke does as well, to be fair. Like they're both, that's why they're kind of mates. It's funny, I know them both. Like Nick used to, I knew Nick from Eastbourne. He was
Okay.
an old Eastbourne regular. Used to DJ under the name Ewok,
Oh,
going
right.
way
Yeah,
way
yeah. I've heard
back.
of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Luke I knew through, I used to DJ on a radio show on Sub FM, which I did for years, and I met Luke through Sub FM. So I know both of these guys from kind of different things, and I've known them both quite a long time. And I think it was Nick and his brother Chris, who had been trying to get into Boomtown for years and years. I think they'd both been like, when it started like 10 years ago or something. And they'd been talking about doing something pre-COVID, I think. Nick and his brother. His brother does like sort of stage construction and
Right. Okay. Yeah.
theatre sets and all that kind of stuff. I hope I've got that right. I'm pretty sure that's what he was saying. But yeah, they just wanted to be there. They wanted to do something there. They had like a kind of a real, you know, burning desire to make something happen at this Boomtown festival. And they've been talking pre-COVID, and then the COVID year it all got cancelled, and so the one that we just went to was the kind of the postponed one from years back. I think that's why people were a bit upset, because obviously the lineup had changed from what they'd originally booked, etc. But I think where
I think people said it was a lot smaller. I mean, it seemed massive to me.
Same.
People seem to say that is a lot smaller. And talking to some people who've been, they said, for example, that hill as you come down, apparently there'd be like stages.
Used to have all stages up there,
all the way up there, which
would
be even more bonkers, because obviously coming into the city. But I just loved that it was, you came down the hill and then you were in this city.
It was like descending into another world, wasn't it?
Perfect. But I mean, we'll see what they do. Hopefully we can get back next year, but we'll see what they come up with next.
For sure. But they'd sort of got me involved, or asked if I wanted to be involved, and I couldn't really say no, and it was a challenge. Definitely a challenge, getting everything down there and getting everything set up. And I was like, I mean, about a week or so, the weeks leading up to the event, I was thinking like, do I need to go and buy an extra amplifier? Do I need to go and buy extra bits in case something goes wrong? Like, I've never done something as big as this for as long as this. I've done a lot of nights, but I haven't done a 4-day event. Was it Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night? So 4 solid nights of loud music. And I was like, if something goes wrong, like it was a big anxiety trigger for sure. I mean, it went amazingly. I think, going back to what I was saying, I think basically there was a cancellation, and it was all a bit last minute. There was supposed to be someone else doing another stage somewhere, and Boomtown, they scaled it, like you said, they scaled it right down for this year. And then they just got an email kind of out the blue saying, if you want to do something, you can do it. This is the space you've got, limited budget, etc. Can you do it? And they just went, so we were all basically making it up as we went along. But the feedback was really, really good, and I think they want to be having us back next year, or certainly having the Botanica Zoo thing back next year. And there was quite a few guys involved. Unfortunately, because I wasn't there much, I'm terrible with names. I can't remember exactly what was going on, but it was a combined effort from a lot of people, and it went very, very well. So
again, it's collaboration. I mean, I was chatting to a couple of guys on the side when I was watching your set, and all really great people and really cool. But talking of which, the sound's not going to be great because it's off my phone, but here's a couple of little clips.
Oh no. Two of my favorite tunes. Oh yeah, classic.
If you don't know, stand on the corner, watch the show. It's fine. Go. So what am I do? Yes, I've got the ammo inside. On the lyrics, scan and find. What's the matter? I'm that guy. Don't you know? I'm gonna be that line.
I mean, the stage, the environment those guys have built.
Yeah, exactly.
It was amazing.
People, make some noise for Tetris, one time!
Oh man.
Just a couple of little clips.
Nice. It's nice to see those actually, because I don't.
I'll send them over to you properly and stuff at some point.
Yeah, thank you.
They're slightly longer, and you might be able to do something with them.
Thank you.
But like you say, it's amazing because from the front, it says like Botanica Zoo or whatever, and I think from memory there might have been at some stages some people in animal masks or something in the windows or something of it. But again, until you can sort of hear the music, but until you sort of go into the room or into the market, whatever it is, and then it's like, wow, yes, this is like being in a jungle or something, and then the sound
absolutely. There was
great,
a whole
and lighting's great, and UV, and then you walk up, and then there's another one, and then you go, and then there's another one, and there must have been, my friend who wasn't at the festival was like, oh, send me, tell me who's the lineup. And I was like, I can't, because, you go through the app and you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
Yeah.
Because there's like 100 stages or whatever. but yeah, it's a pretty bonkers.
It was just great, and it's some of the people that I've spoken to said that the one this year was more like how it used to be when it started.
Okay,
which was I mean, there's I'm sure there's the whole free party scene is a kind of a massive thing, right? And that harks right back to the rave days. Like when there weren't like proper nightclubs, some guys would just chuck some speakers up in a field with a generator and they just blast music all night long, and they escalated to like quite extreme levels in some cases.
Exactly. Yeah.
And but that's the kind of the ethos of Boomtown is just freedom and music, and but more specifically, I suppose, dance music. And I think from what people were saying, the last couple of years before COVID, they were getting in like bigger bands and stuff, and trying to get like headliners in to encourage like more people, but then it wasn't like quite the same vibe and crowd like it.
I think they had quite a decent. I think it's quite. I mean, I love my reggae, so there was lots of reggae, which was great, and obviously on a big sound systems. And they had just a little smattering of hip hop, which was good. So obviously Arrested Development, De La Soul, bands like the Skins, who I saw, which I like. And there was enough. For me, it was pretty much perfect festival because pretty much everywhere I went, there was something great to sort of watch. But yeah, but I can see it could potentially be spoiled if they do go down the route of trying to be other festivals. I think they're just going to stick with what they're doing. And I think it's sold out this year. I'm sure it will.
I don't know. I've heard kind of mixed things. I did get an interesting email because I was kind of, I don't know if you got the same thing, being sort of part of the crew effectively. But I did get an email, and it was really interesting email actually, where they basically were really open about stuff after the festival, and they talked about what they're going to try and do like going forwards and stuff like this, because it was an independent festival as well.
Exactly.
It didn't have any big backers and stuff. I think this year, well, by their own admission, presented quite a lot of struggles for them. Financially and all the rest of it. So it will be interesting to see where it goes next, because they've kind of reborn themselves as well, haven't they, by their own admission? They called it Chapter 1 this year.
Exactly.
So it will be interesting to see where it goes.
It's and I think it's quite interesting. I mean, even just on a little side note, the payment side of things. You had to get a wristband, you had to top it up, and obviously that was what you used sort of going around the place. You didn't have to have your cards if you didn't want to. You didn't have to have cash. I mean, a couple of people were complaining about they run out of charge on their phone, so they need to charge their phone to then stuff like that. But on a basic level, it's a pretty cool idea. You just got a wristband, and you just sort of swipe and buy what you want, which is also clever for them, because then they can see how much people are spending at the festival, and where they're
I'm sure there's
and tracking and data and all the assets. So there's a lot of that going on as well. But it was interesting to see, because I was like, well, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? But it worked, and it was quite cool.
I think so. I like, what I do like is the concept that you have less things on you, right? You don't, everyone's probably going to have their mobile phone on them, but that's all you actually need. Like, you just have one thing on you. You're not trying to worry about your wallet and whatever else kind of goes with it. Taking cards out and dropping stuff. Like, you've just got your phone, if that, and then this wristband, and you can just be like, as free as you kind of want to be, while still being able to partake in eating and drinking.
That was the thing. I think it, there was a lot of freedom, but it also felt very safe. Very safe sort of place to be. And I think that's quite difficult to pull off sometimes. But
on that scale, definitely.
I think it was about 50 or 60,000 people. It's a lot of people. But it's great. So a really open question. Where next? What do you see? Have you got some events lined up? Have you got some gigs lined up? What's the plan for the sort of foreseeable?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard, because doing gigs as I kind of used to do them. I mean, you know, I've got to give a shout out to the Mine, which is an event I supplied sound for and DJ'd at for many years. It's their 10th birthday coming up this weekend.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And you know, 10 years on from that first system night that happened, I don't know whether that system night in London, I'm sure Dooku and originally Sibla were at that system night. Maybe that was the inspiration for them to set up this night, the Mine, down in Brighton. But yeah, it's their 10th birthday this weekend, down at the good old Volks. And I think they're doing one at the Electric in Brighton as well.
Oh, that's another great venue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really it feels like you're in someone's house, doesn't it? It feels like it's kind of weird. It's got weird like house party almost vibe to it.
We went to see a band called Luo, which is a Brighton, Bristol sort of electronic jazz sort of band. And again, you sort of go in and you're like, oh, so that's the bar. It looks like the lounge, and then there's a recording studio there, and then you sort of this in little room. But yeah, it's a great venue. Great venue.
It's a cool spot, yeah. And I played with them. And I used to take my sound system down into the basement at Volks, so down in room 2. I used to get my sound system and stuff down in there, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'm supposed to be playing on Friday night at their 10th birthday.
Oh, nice.
I say supposed to be playing because yeah, family life, logistics and stuff. It just gets in the way, and you know, the night. When I used to do the sound system for the night used to run till 7 a.m.
Right.
So you know, my biggest issue with the sound system is that I don't have my own van, so it makes transporting it really difficult. I've got to hire something, and then that presents a whole load of problems. So I used to go and pick up a hire van at 5 p.m. I'd then go back to my place, load it up with the system, and drive over to Brighton 7 p.m. get everything set up for like 9, and then it would get to 7 a.m. and then the night would finish, and I'd have to load it all back out into the van, and I'd have to drive it back home. I'd get back at like 9 a.m. Sometimes I'd have work that same day, so I'd just go straight to work until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was just like, you know, you do these things when you can, right? You take these opportunities when they present themselves, and when you can do it. And I just can't do it anymore.
The festival makes more sense, doesn't it? Because you've only got to drive there once, load once, unload once, and then back. You know,
it's kind of in the daytime, or you're staying there, so you're kind of around it. And so daytime events and festivals is definitely more what I would like to do with it. The sound system now.
And like we were saying a bit earlier, you know, sort of trying to, because of the family, trying to keep it family friendly, because then they're involved as well. Because you just never know what your kids are going to be into. One of the guys, I don't know, do you know Darren Fox? So him and Ross did the sound system for Camp of Marmalade, and so Darren was teaching his little boy about you know, setting up the subs and all the rest of it. And it's good that again it's passing on this knowledge from a young age, and they might be into it later, they might not be, but again it's great to sort of have them around. Okay, well that sounds cool, that sounds good. And it's been great. It's been really educational, really informative.
Well, I mean, if some of what I've said's been useful, then
definitely. I've enjoyed it, and it's certainly, you know, I'm sure people will listen back. But I'm just gonna raid out. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no problems.
I don't know how. That's fine. Yeah. So what we do, we're just sending people who've been watching this to one of our other DJs, Mr. Salt. So we'll go and see him. But Ed, thanks a lot. Hang around for a minute after we say goodbye. We'll just have a quick chat afterwards. But it's been really great, and I will speak to you again soon, obviously. And then hopefully we'll meet in a field or venue or something soon.
I hope so.
We'll put something together further down the line.
Definitely. We've got to make it happen. I think where there's a will, there's a way. So we'll make it happen. And thank you for having me. And thanks for having me on the.
No,
on the
very
show.
Welcome. Thanks for being the first guest on this new show. But
nice one,
cheers,
pleasure,
Ed.
mate.
Take it easy, and thanks everyone.
Yeah, take care.